I've always liked the appeal of horror games, but because horror is subjective, it seems like it would be hard to really nail down a formula that can consistently scare people. If you focus too much on story and atmosphere but not enough on gameplay, your game will be compared to a walking simulator like Outlast. Focus too much on gameplay and action, and you get Resident Evil 5, and I guess half of the campaigns in Resident Evil 6. Usually, I don't get too scared with horror games, so I tend to analyze the story more. Come my surprise when a babyface Mr.LetsGame heard about Until Dawn, a beautiful looking horror game with the gimmick of choosing how some of the events in the story go down. For obvious reasons, writing a game with branching story paths is difficult, especially for the indie developer Massive Games, which, despite their name, the developer wasn't known for much other than making a few DLCs for Little Big Planet and a Doctor Who game, which was meant to launch a series, but due to poor reviews only saw a single entry. It seems their luck would change once they cut their teeth on their original title, Until Dawn. Originally planned to be a PlayStation Move title for the PlayStation 3, but dropping most of the motion controls for the PlayStation 4. They tried following it up with a sequel and a prequel, but neither would strike the same charm or charisma of the first game. Bandai Namco then partnered with them in another attempt to capture the same audience with the Dark Pictures anthology series, which has seen some success in the UK market and will be releasing its final installment of the first season later this year, as well as releasing a brand new IP called The Quarry that will be releasing after this video is made, which I will definitely be reviewing next. For those who want a spoiler-free review, I would say this is a good game to play with some friends or a significant other if you get it for a good price. Or, if you own a PS5, it's free with the PlayStation Collection. That being said, spoilers ahead. I'll be breaking down the plot, characters, as well as things I liked and disliked about the game. Unfortunately, this is going to be a short review. Due to some recording issues, the audio for the game didn't record and I'm already behind, so I just decided to make it anyways. I deeply apologize for this, and I have made steps to prevent this from happening in the future. Now that the formalities are out of the way, let's game. The story and characters start off pretty basic. A group of teenagers consisting of the usual horror tropes are chilling in a cabin out in the woods on top of a mountain. The group decides to play a prank on a teenage girl named Hannah by having Mike, a guy who she's been crushing over, pretending he wants to bang her, which Hannah jumps on the first chance she gets, wasting no time getting naked. Her friends bust out with selfie sticks before getting in trouble for voyeurism, and Hannah runs out into the woods pursued by her sister Beth. Once the two meet up, they feel they are being stalked and run deeper into the forest before accidentally falling to their deaths. A year goes by, and to the world, Hannah and Beth ran off and are still missing. Her brother Josh, who was at the party but had no involvement with the prank, invites all the friends back to the cabin to have a good time, seeming to put the past behind him. We are introduced to the cast, showing some typical teenage drama, like Mike's new girlfriend Jessica meeting his ex-girlfriend Emily, Josh encouraging Chris to bang his friend Ashley, and Matt seeing his new girlfriend Emily hugging her ex Mike. It then starts transitioning to actual horror when Mike is bending over backwards to get some strange from Jessica. They have a small adventure down in some mines before finding their way to the guest cabin where Mike tries to set the mood. Just then, Jessica is pulled through the cabin door by something. In his pursuit of Jessica, he finds himself at a hidden mental asylum up on the mountain. Meanwhile, Chris, Ashley, and Josh have a seance with Hannah's spirit. Kinda. I'll explain that later. And got separated and knocked out by a dude in a creepy clown mask. When they wake up, they are subjected to a deadly game straight out of the Saw franchise, where Chris has to choose to kill Ashley or Josh while saving the other. This may seem like a major choice with lasting consequences, but Josh is killed no matter what choice is made. I know because I picked Ashley to die because, obviously bros before hoes, but Josh was picked anyways. One thing I want to add about this scene is Ashley never gets pissed at Chris for his choice. She thanks him for picking her, even though Chris verbally tells her he is sorry for picking her to die. Anyways, Ashley and Chris escape and find Matt and Emily as they explain what happened, which the last we saw of Emily and Matt was back when it was 9 hours before dawn. Emily takes Matt to help her find one of her pink bags, which he clearly brought up with him to the cabin. But the next time we see them, it's almost a good hour and 40 minutes when they meet up with Chris and Ashley. I just find it a little crazy they spent that much time searching for their bag out in the cold. Although Emily does seem like that kind of level of crazy, so I'll give it a pass. So the focus shifts to Mike, who is following a man and his 2 dogs into the asylum. He believes this man is responsible for Jessica's death, so he's quite pissed. He finds a lot of clues about a group of miners who came to the asylum after they were trapped in a cave-in. It is of note to him that there was about 30 miners that entered the mines that day, but only less than half came out. Besides befriending one of the guy's doggos and a humorous glitch with the lamp, there isn't much else that happens. I mean, he does get his hand caught in a bear trap, and you have the option to cut off his 2 fingers to escape, or sacrifice his machete to save them. He also looks pretty badass with this jacket that makes him look like Joel from The Last of Us. Oh yeah, and he almost blows himself up opening this door. It jumps back to Matt and Emily, who decide to go to a fire tower to see if they can get some help on the radio after they find the cable cart station has been trashed and the keys to start it are missing. They head out and see a lot of deers that start flashing gang signs at them, and things look pretty dire. We then finally see that Sam, the character who we started the game with, has been taking a bath this whole time. I find this the second most infuriating thing about the plot, since she's been missing for longer than Matt and Emily were. Although this isn't entirely out of the realm of possibility, since I know a lot of people who take long baths. I'll get to number 1 in a little bit. So Sam's finally aware that something doesn't feel right, and thinking her friends are playing a prank on her, she investigates to find a psycho who's put together a video of Josh's execution and Sam getting out of the tub. This guy's editing skills must be on point. She gets chased down for a little bit before the psycho knocks her out with some gas. It swaps back to Matt and Emily looking like they're about to get yeeted off this cliff by the deer gang, but because we never harmed any animals, they let us through. They're able to get through to an emergency station with the radio in the fire tower, but the men on the other line say that there's a bad snowstorm coming in and won't be able to rescue them until dawn. Just then, someone tries to get into the tower. I bet Matt feels like a freaking idiot after dropping the axe before climbing the tower. Like, why would you do that? Whatever is trying to get in stops and instead destroys the support cables holding up the tower, causing it to fall into the mines. Matt tries to save Emily, but no matter what you choose, the tower collapses and Matt jumps off, leaving Emily's fate unknown. Just then, someone starts dragging Matt away, but since Emily gave him a flare gun in the fire tower, he shoots it at whatever is holding him and manages to escape his fate. We see what Chris and Ashley are up to, deciding to try to find Sam. They check out the basement and are pursued by a ghost. Yeah, this game goes places. Speaking of going places, they find some sort of abandoned hotel area below the cabin and find Sam knocked out on a chair. Before they can help her, the psycho, who really hasn't been doing much killing, knocks out Chris while Ashley stabs him in the shoulder. The psycho actually seems to be taken aback by this, saying the phrase "live and learn" before knocking her out with a Falco punch. You'd think this would be brought up again later, but it doesn't. When Chris and Ashley come to, they are both in another death contraption. This time, Chris must choose to kill Ashley or himself to free them before the buzzsaw is dropped on their heads. I decide to let Chris kill himself, and it cuts away before it shows the conclusion. Sam is woken up by Mike, who's in the other room, and I swear to God, this towel on Sam's body is the real MVP. I officially nominate it Towel of the Year. So Mike helps free her, and Sam gets dressed into her workout gear before they bust into the room Ashley and Chris are being held in. Despite my choices, No one has seemed to have died yet, and the psycho's identity is revealed to be Josh all along. It then cuts to Emily hanging upside down in the mine. She has a little mini adventure down here, finding Beth's head and a grave marker for her grave, but no sign of Hannah's fate. She is then chased by a man carrying a flamethrower, which finds her after a little game of hide and seek. We then see the conclusion to what's happening back at the cabin. Josh goes on this big monologue on how he feels they're all responsible for Hannah and Beth's disappearance, and how he faked the whole thing. The psycho that's been stalking them, the ghosts which turns out to be holograms, and even his own execution. Mike has heard enough and knocks him out for killing Jessica. But when Josh comes to, he swears that his pranks were extreme, but he didn't kill anyone. Josh is clearly mentally disturbed at this point, and the group can't tell what to make of this, so they hog-tie his ass up in the shed. We then get to see how Emily and her flame-grilled adventure plays out. The guy surprisingly doesn't want to hurt her, but before he can explain anything, they hear a noise coming from deeper inside the mines that is fast approaching. The stranger tosses her a few road flares and tells her to run. She manages to escape the mine and make it back to the cabin, but not before getting bitten by whatever was chasing her. She relays to the group all the important bits like Beth's head and the existence of the mine and the mountain, but before she can give too much exposition, there's a knock at the door. Mike covers the door with the gun while Chris opens it, and it's the flamethrower-wielding stranger from the asylum with the two dogs and the guy who helped Emily out in the mines. He disarms Mike in 2 seconds and looks like he's about to chew bubblegum and kick their ass. Fortunately for them, he's all out of ass and just wants them to listen. He then explains the final hidden monster that's been on the mountain this whole time, and was also the thing that took Jessica, which is a Wendigo. From the urban legends I have heard about the monster, it can morph into other people and things while mimicking them to varying degrees of effectiveness. In this iteration, the stranger claims that they have hard skin so shotguns only stun them, but they can be killed by fire. He also says the curse of the Wendigo can possess anyone who has tasted human flesh, and they can't see you if you stand completely still. He advises them to find a safe place and wait until dawn, when the Wendigo can't roam around anymore. One quick note here, the voice actor for the stranger is awesome. He sounds so badass. Chris doesn't want Josh to be killed by the Wendigo, so the stranger volunteers to go with him. When they reach the location, Josh is gone and the stranger tells Chris they need to leave. On their way back, they're ambushed by the Wendigo and the stranger biffs it. Chris then runs and guns it back to the cabin where Ashley lets him in. It seems like Chris maybe could have died here if his relationship with Ashley was in a bad place, or maybe someone else would let him in. The group is pretty bummed after the stranger's death, most of them just wanting to tough it out in the cabin until dawn. But since Mike is an actual G now, he wants to go and wipe the Wendigo out once and for all. He also deduces that Josh is probably the only one with the keys to the cable cart, so he has to venture into the lair if they are to leave, since they're not sure if the storm will clear by dawn. It's just then that Ashley points out Emily was bitten by the Wendigo, and she might change into one unless she's killed. This is an interesting choice since we don't have confirmation that this can happen, but we also don't have proof that this isn't the case. I decided against killing Emily, and Mike goes off to get the key from Josh while everyone else reads the stranger's journal. They see that the bites have no factor in someone changing into a Wendigo, since the Wendigo only possesses a person when they consume human flesh. Emily is not really relieved by this, since Ashley was just yelling at Mike a few seconds ago to kill her, so she practices her pimp hand on Ashley and she leaves embarrassed. I actually thought it was pretty funny that Chris barely reacted to that. Sam reads a little bit more of the book and says they need to find Mike quick. So quick, she doesn't give any explanation or take any firearms with them. Mike then finds the secret entrance into the asylum and locks the door behind him so no one else can follow him. He picks up some clues, a torch, and a literal boomstick. He then meets up with the dog he found earlier, and the doggo is a lot more friendlier than last time, it seems. Basically, what Mike finds here is the miners that survived the cave-in consumed some of the workers to survive, and they turned into Wendigos in the asylum. And unfortunately, they're still alive and want Mike for dessert. This part of the game is one of my favorite because it's pure action. But the mood is really dampened for me because he never freaking reloads. I counted, and he shoots the sawed-off double barrel 13 times without reloading. Also, the doggo keeps disappearing and reappearing at will. And then at the end, it kind of just walks away. Hopefully he made it out of this explosion. Anyways, so it switches now to Jessica, who's been absent for most of the game, and is miraculously alive down in the mines. But before she can do anything, it switches back to Sam, Chris, Ashley, and Emily. They come to an impasse in the form of a rock wall, and since Sam is the only one with rock climbing experience, the rest of them go back to the cabin while Sam goes to look for Josh and Mike. It shows a quick scene of Josh being dropped, and I'm pretty sure he would be dead or very badly injured by this fall. Sam then meets up with Mike, who is killing a Wendigo, and they decide to take on the horrors of the mine together. The game then jumps over to Josh, who's having some sort of psychotic episode of his dead sister talking to him. It's a pretty trippy scene, I guess. Mike and Sam are exploring the mines, and this is where you can have a slightly different ending depending on if you choose to go to the left or the right. But if you go to the left, Sam finds a journal written by Hannah showing she actually ate Beth's body to stay alive, and it's implied that she turned into a Wendigo. They then meet Josh and tell him what happened to Beth and Hannah. Sam decides to climb out of the cave and send help for Mike and Josh. Josh then gets caught by Hannah, who is now a Wendigo, and because he says her name, it seems like she actually remembers him and drags him off while Mike escapes. It then finally shows us Matt, and he finds Jessica down in the mines, and they escape before a Wendigo catches them. I will say it is very easy to get your characters killed in the last tenth of the game here. I actually had to reload a save because I decided to run from the Wendigo and Jessica couldn't keep up. Sam finally manages to climb out of the mines and meets up with Mike back at the cabin. This last section of the game is actually kind of fun. All of the Wendigos and the teenagers are at the cabin. You have to remain still while they fight amongst each other, and the teenagers leave one by one until Sam is able to cause the house to explode by having Mike break a light bulb while the house fills up with gas, and turn on the light bulb, igniting the cabin in a ball of flames. And if you do it right, everyone but Josh should be rescued.
Mission accomplished. Good work.
There's also a cool ending credits where you can get to see all the characters who survived give their side of the story. And you also see Josh feasting on the stranger's body, clearly implying that he has turned into a Wendigo himself. This game is a very mixed bag, which is a shame because I looked at all the behind the scenes gameplay and they really wanted this game to be good. They hooked up playtesters to lie detectors and made them play the game to see what parts were scary and what parts needed to be changed. So you gotta give them a little bit of credit. I also really liked the characters themselves. Yeah, they were all teenage horror movie archetypes, but I thought they were very funny and the actors really made it their own. I think everyone here really worked well in the story except for Josh, who was the crazy guy, Jessica, who was the sassy hot girl, who really didn't do much other than get kidnapped, and Sam, who really didn't do much until the end. My favorite performance had to be the stranger, who was actually one of the writers of the game. Something about him is just so awesome and badass. Speaking of badass, I also really liked how Mike started out as this jokester party animal, but then turns into this grizzled badass by the end of the game. And it's awesome to watch his transformation. There's also a lot of collectibles throughout the game in the form of clues that will help you understand more of the background story of the mountain, the miners, and the asylum. There's also these totems that are scattered around, which are kinda cool. There's all different types, like some of them warn of upcoming threats. Some will show you a possible good thing that will happen, and others will foretell death. None of them are set in stone, and fate can always be changed, of course. Okay, so we talked about some good, now some bad. Other than the lack of actual branching paths until the last tenth of the game, one thing I really hated was the Dr. Hill sections. I didn't even put them in my review until now, because they aren't even really relevant to the story, and you could remove them altogether like I just did, and it wouldn't change a thing. Basically, Dr. Hill seems to be Josh's psyche, and the layout of his office gets more disturbed as the game goes on. He asks you multiple choice questions and about the events of the game, but they mean literally nothing. I honestly don't know why they're even in the game other than potentially the star power of the actor, which he actually does a pretty good job at. Another thing I dreaded was before you see Dr. Hill, there's an in-game cutscene that plays, and it's meant to look like a TV show recap, but the resolution is crap. I could understand if it actually showed the important decisions you make throughout the game, and it had to load them in real time, but it never actually shows any of your choices in these cutscenes until the last 1/10 of the game. All in all, the game is an okay experience. While the gameplay is pretty lackluster, a first-time playthrough will definitely keep you entertained with the right balance of humor, suspense, and switching of genres. I will say right now that this game was not worth the $60 at launch. But if you can pick it up on sale for less than $10, or get it for free if you have a PlayStation 5, then it's definitely worth a playthrough. Especially if you can convince someone who gets scared really easily to play it with you. Anyways, thank you for watching my review. Consider liking, subscribing, and commenting below if you liked it or not. Sorry if this review was kind of all over the place. I'm still kind of finding my footing when it comes to editing, scripting, and publishing these videos. And as I stated before, there were some serious technical troubles, but I wanted it to be out by June 10th no matter what, so I decided to power through. Granted, if nothing crazy happens during the editing process, it should be out the day The Quarry is released. I'll also be doing a full review on that game, and I can't wait to see what Supermassive Games has learned from the Until Dawn and Dark Pictures anthology series. One more thing, I have a 3.5-hour review of The Last of Us Part 2. I go in depth on every aspect of that game and point out all the good and bad. I spent a lot of time on that, so if you're interested, please give it a watch. I'm also thinking of launching my own gaming news channel. I've still got to get a few things together, like the artwork, but I was planning on launching it the same time my review of The Quarry comes out. With that, I hope you all have a good day.